Hello, this is going to be a stating the obvious video. I haven't done one really for a long time, so I'm kind of excited, I'm kind of hyped about it. Um, Although this is going to be an unusual one in that even though it is stating the obvious, it's more, I'm not actually stating anything, like there isn't a concrete argument that I'm making, it's more I'm rebutting other arguments. And this all pertains to Snatch because Snatch unbanned, comes back off the list, and I find that most people are either on one end or the other. They're either like, oh, it's really broken, or oh, it's really bad, and uh, I've observed both arguments as to why, and it's generally the arguments are generally quite unfounded, which irritates me. So this is more just going to be me uh, rebutting that rather than stating my own opinion. And I'll get onto all of that. I was gonna do like a ban list reaction video, which I probably will still do, but I wanted to do this one first because basically if I did do the ban list video, like the whole ban list video would have just been this video, so I didn't want to like detract that video and all its stuff. So yeah, without further ado, Snatch, since it's come back, people have had mixed opinions, albeit polarized opinions. So the general reaction I've seen is either, oh yeah, it's broken, it shouldn't have come back, or it's really bad. And it isn't about those statements as such, but the reasons for those statements. Having seen arguments that people have made, I'm not really happy with them, so I just wanted to discuss them here. So I'll start with the arguments, or argument I should say, for why Snatch Steal is bad. Well, there are two arguments really, but there's like both of them are really bad arguments. So I'll address the smaller one now. Like some people say, like a lot of people say, oh, it's bad because it's old and stuff like that. It's like, obviously stuff like that is just stupid. Like a lot of people are saying really stupid things like that, like, oh, because it was banned back in a time when it was much more powerful, and now power creep dictates that the card is no longer as such. It's like, really old cards are often the most powerful because they released things without really knowing what their game was about. So in terms of card design, obviously there are things that are just too powerful even now. Like if Chaos Emperor came back, if Ring of Destruction came back without their erratas, then they would be way too powerful for the game as it is, and for the game at any stage really. So just saying like, oh, it's old, but I mean, like that's such an obviously unfounded argument. But to me, the other argument is just as obviously unfounded, which makes me aggrieved that I even have to make a video discussing such an argument. It's the one where people say, "Oh, MST is back." I mean, so what? Nah, MST is at 3, so Snatch still being back is fine. I don't know why I said MST is back. I get muddled. But yeah, MST is at 3, so Snatch still is bad. It's like, I mean, a lot of people already know that this is a silly argument, but I'm going to say why it is a silly argument because I've watched videos and read comments of people countering that argument. So people will be like, oh yeah, everyone's saying Snatch Steal is bad because MST is at 3. You're wrong. And it's like, yeah, obviously they're wrong, but like, do you know why they're wrong? And I think that's the more important bit. It's more about the why rather than just how it is. So the reason why that is a silly argument is because you assume that every time they have Snatch Steal, you have MST, or every time you have Snatch Steal, they have MST. To say that one card makes another card bad because that one counters it is to imply that every time you have the aggressor, the opposition will have the correct reaction to it, which is a completely false assumption. It's like the chances of you drawing Snatch Steal and the chances of them also drawing MST and the chances of them not having used MST up until that point, and you know, all these things, like it's a very unique situation. Will it happen? Of course it will happen. You'll activate Snatch Steal and they'll MST it, but that's not to say that Snatch Steal is a bad card because of the existence of MST, because then all continuous cards will be bad, and obviously that's not true. Floodgates are very potent, especially going into the release of Necros and Heroes, where Cliff Forts in the OCG tend to play many more Floodgates, along with Scout, which is already an MST magnet. Of course, yeah, it's very real. And you only have so many MST. This is something that people seem to understand, and I saw Mega Capital G's video where he said that he implied that having more MST would mitigate it. He said like that a flaw with the argument of Snatch Steal is bad because MST exists is, well, we didn't get more MST. It's like we can never get more MST. We can never get more sufficient MST. And I don't mean in the sense of, well, you're only allowed 3 copies of a card in a deck and Mystical Space Typhoon is at 3. No, like they could release a card with like the same effect as MST if they wanted to. But the point is that there are only so many cards you can play, which I'll get onto later for a separate point. Like, you're only allowed so much space in the deck. MST does not serve as a consistency card or even a utility card. MST is a very staple power card. I don't mean staple in terms of like you have to run it. I mean staple in terms of like it is a categorical example of a very very basic yet very effective power card, because destroying a spell or trap is a powerful effect. Simplifying the game state is a powerful effect. And there's only so much room that you have for things like simplification, because your deck will inherently have a certain amount of space dedicated to it for its primary engine, which in the case of certainly Necros and Cliff Forts is quite a lot. The engine takes up quite a lot of space, but you're rewarded by having very good engines in doing so. But it also means that you don't have as much space for simplification. Basically, you can't, even if you had access to infinite amounts of MSTs, you wouldn't run them. There are times where you wouldn't even run MST even with access to 3, and this has proven true. People only tend to play MST if there's a particular need for it in recent times, as in like very recent, this format and the format before that. People played MST for emptiness, and then emptiness faded out and people no longer played emptiness, and then once Cliff Forts came around, that re-incentivized people to play MST. And Snatch Steal isn't one of those things. It isn't like Snatch Steal will create an abundance in, create an increase in the use of MST, because it's a limited card. It isn't something that is consistent enough to be a real threat, although I will get onto that side of the argument later in relation to another point. But the point of this is that to say that MST makes Snatch Steal bad is to firstly assume that you'll always have the MST to deal with Snatch Steal, they'll always have the MST to deal with your Snatch Steal, which is just wrong. It's just incorrect. There are times where that's even beneficial. you will sometimes want to bait out their MST, because then the value that you get out of that card is essentially an MST. So say if you can get game and they have one back row and one monster, and you're, like, you can game through the monster, and you're thinking, well, I want to bait out their back row, but I don't want to just commit in case it's, like a TT or a warning or an emptiness or something. So in that case, if you use the Snatch Steal and they MST it, then that was very good that the Snatch Steal got MST'd, because you obtained productive value out of the Snatch Steal. And it's just the linearity with which the people who adopt that argument think that the scenarios work out, although that applies to the other side, which again I'll get onto. The game isn't linear. There are plenty of scenarios, plenty of situations, and this is just one of many situations that, yeah, your Snatch Steal may end up getting MST'd at some point. Like, that happens. That doesn't make it bad, because there are plenty of times where it won't get MST'd, and then if it doesn't get MST'd, it's a very powerful effect. You just have to look at it in terms of what the card is, and what the card is, yeah, it is weak to MST. That's an inherent part of any continuous card or any equip card. But in terms of the effect, is the effect strong enough to be of use? Yeah, of course it is. Any sort of steal an opponent's monster effect is very powerful, and that's always been the case. That's why all of them were banned for the longest, besides like Big Eye and Evil Swarm Bahamut, where it's like, yeah, cool, whatever, do it. So yeah, MST does not make Snatch Steal bad, and MST also isn't always played. So even then, like, there are times where MST won't be played, and in those times the argument that Snatch Steal is bad because MST exists is redundant, because MST won't exist. So even that argument as a foundation for Snatch Steal's merit being in the game is flimsical. Flimsical. No, it's flimsy, because MST is not a perpetual part of the game. It is something that comes in and out depending on how everything else is. So yeah, that was way too long to address that one point. But yeah, those are the only arguments for why Snatch Steal is bad. And what I would say is, like, you can say Snatch Steal is bad. When I first heard the list, my immediate reaction was, like, Snatch Steal. I heard that Snatch Steal came off, and I wasn't happy about it, but I wasn't annoyed about it. How I am is that I'll get emotional reactions to things, or like gut instinct reactions to things, and sometimes I don't quite know why that is the case, but I know that I'm right in feeling what I'm feeling, so I like to backtrack and then try and rationalize the way that I'm feeling. So when it came to Snatch Steal, I didn't really know why I felt that way about Snatch Steal, and I still don't, and I could be proven wrong. I've just thought about it a little bit more. However, my gut feeling reaction was, it isn't that bad for the game for it to be back. And whether or not that'll be the case, who knows, but that was initially how I felt. But then, because I hadn't formulated an actual argument on it, I didn't speak about it. I just sat and observed. I didn't make a video like stating the obvious, Snatch Steal is bad, because I had no reason. I had no reason to validate my claim. So what I would say is, I think that on either side, a lot of people are either saying that it's here or here to just try and provoke opinion. Like, a lot of people are saying Snatch Steal is bad because it's the cool thing to say. And as much as I love being the one saying the cool thing to say, don't say it unless you have like a really well-founded argument, and there isn't a well-founded argument on why Snatch Steal is bad, because Snatch Steal isn't bad. Like, I mean, I will discuss it further at the end of this video. I'll discuss my own personal opinion, but like, don't just latch onto the first argument that you can think of, because like, it's wrong. It's wrong. It's an incorrect statement to say that Snatch Duel is bad because MST exists. And a lot of people will be watching this now thinking like, yeah, it's fucking obvious, but yeah, it is obvious. So, you know, um, I I hope that such a thing does not occur again, because it's logical fallacy, and I see people still discussing it, like with things like emptiness, saying oh well, it's bad because MST exists, and it's like, no, obviously it isn't. Um, but there's a difference. A time where you could cite MST as being a factor in a discussion on Snatch Duel is if you compared Snatch Duel with something else. Say if you said, well, maybe I think Brain Control should have come back over Snatch Duel. One person might say, well, Snatch Duel is weak to MST, which makes it a bit more fair than Brain Control. Then that's a decent time in which to cite MST, but not the card is bad because of the existence of MST, because that's wrong. It's logically fallible. You don't always have the MST, and the game doesn't always feature MST. So yeah, that's the rebuttal of the why Snatch Duel is bad part of it. So for why Snatch Duel is broken, there are three main arguments that I've observed. The first is it allows you to steal an opponent's thing in OTK. Like, the way that the format is at the moment, things are very fast paced, so like if you open with the Snatch Steal and you go second and they have a monster or something, which a lot of decks do, a lot of decks produce a big-ish monster on the first turn, then you can steal it and it will enable you to OTK more easily. What I would say about that is, will that scenario happen? Yeah, probably. There are times where, you know, you will go second, they go first turn Dante or something, and then you just go steal Dante, blah, game, or, you know, something like that. It probably will happen at some point, and it will probably happen to you as well at some point. However, I don't think that it will happen anywhere near enough as much as people seem to assume that it will. Again, I feel like it is a scenario among a plethora of other scenarios, and people are latching onto this one thing, ignoring all of this, like getting here and saying, oh well, this is bad, and it's like, well, all of this exists too. This is just an iota among other scenarios. So if you think about it, depending on which deck you're playing, I guess, the likelihood of you going second, because Snatch Duel isn't really good going first for that purpose of OTKing, it isn't really good going first. You assume you're going second, and you assume that it is favorable for you to go second, which sometimes it is, depending on the deck and the matchup, etc. So you go second, the probability of you having Snatch Steal and the rest of your 5 cards being enough to OTK, which in Shadow would be fusion related stuff, like obviously it's fusion related stuff. What I mean is, it would require all 5 cards. Like there doesn't exist like a 3-card OTK in this format, really. In order to OTK, everything necessitates having like your whole hand designed for that kill. So the probability of you having Snatch Steal and the rest of your hand being a kill hand, and them not having the defensive capabilities to withstand that pressure with the loss of their monster, or one of those pieces in your hand being something like Denko Sekka, which would eliminate that problem. So there are 2 variants: either like they just have no back row and then you have 5 cards in your hand and all 5 of those cards can be Blair cards, or they have a bunch of back row but you have a card that eliminates that back row, like Denko, which is another limited example, but basically does the same thing. The probability of that scenario being the case is tragically low. And I mean, sure, it it will happen, but it isn't a real thing. Like it is real in the sense that it will happen, but it isn't real in the sense of it doesn't happen enough for you to merit Snatch Steal based on that, based on well, Snatch Steal is going to achieve me this many OTKs in times where I would not have had the OTK before, and that's the important thing. I think that people are looking at Snatch Steal and thinking, well, Snatch Steal complements when you want to OTK, therefore Snatch Steal is broken, rather than looking at everything else which exists. Like, if you have those 5 cards in your hand where you can OTK, how often will it be that Snatch Steal really makes the extra bit of difference to that OTK? When will it be the case that, sorry, how often will it be the case that having the ability to take an opponent's monster will provide you with the means to OTK? Versus, I mean, I wouldn't say you could draw any card in its place, because that's wrong. Like, if you draw a trap, that's not going to be useful for you to OTK. But versus an aggressive power spell, like something like Raigeki or Dark Hole, how often will Snatch Steal be much more improved over Dark Hole, Raigeki, stuff like that? Or even MST, just something that allows you to aggress, something that enables you to aggress that turn. How often will it be the case that Snatch Steal is the card that makes the difference versus everything else that you could possibly run, or everything else that you do possibly run? I would wager that that scenario, again, will occur, because taking an opponent's monster is a very powerful effect, but not as much as everyone seems to be making out. So in that scenario, is Snatch Steal broken? Yeah, kind of. Assuming that they don't have an out to the Snatch Steal, and assuming that they don't have an out to the rest of your hand, and assuming that they just die then and there, and like the rest of your hand is able to just OTK them. Yeah, Snatch Steal is kind of broken then. But that is such a unique scenario, such a specific scenario, that you can't take that example and universalize it across all of Snatch Steal's interactions and say that, well, all of Snatch Steal is like this because of this. It's like, no, it isn't necessarily that way. So that's one example. And likewise, another argument is people say, well, you can steal specific things that are very powerful. You can steal a BLS, you can steal a Dante and swing for 2/5, stuff like that. What I would say to that is, I'm personally kind of happy that you have the opportunity to steal a BLS, and people complain about it. They're like, yeah, well, you go Snatch Steal, BLS, attack, honest game, and it's like, well, that's an absurd scenario. That's a truly absurd scenario. It isn't necessarily something that will never happen, but it's like, if you can luxurize your hand to the point where you can have Snatch Steal, honest, and like steal their BLS, and you're still alive to steal their BLS, it's like, yeah, cool, of course that's powerful. But that's just like, you're customizing your scenario to highlight a point, rather than looking at the scenario which exists and derive points from that. In my mind, it's good that you're allowed to steal very powerful monsters, because previously people could just throw very powerful cards onto the field and have no real repercussion for it. People could just drop BLS and Dark Armed and stuff like that and swing, and it would be okay. It wouldn't be a problem. Like, they could afford to not kill you. They could overextend, so to speak, and then pass, and then it wouldn't be overextension, because there wasn't anything sufficient to deal with it. And even things like Dark Hole, Raigeki, which are very powerful removal effects, so many cards in the current game float or have destruction prevention or things like this. It just means that those cards are much more limited in use. They don't actually punish overextension, because you immediately gain advantage back. So it isn't overextension. All it does is clear the field so that you can push for game that turn. That's the only use that certainly Raigeki has at this moment when you play it if you use it in Shaddolls or Burning Abyss or even Cliff or something like that, its primary use is just remove things from the field for long enough for me to kill you, which is this turn. It isn't, well, you committed too much, let me punish you, which was traditionally what Dark Hole was. Traditionally what a card like Heavy Storm was as well. And Snatch Steal is unique now because it actually does punish overextension. If they just drop a BLS or a Dark Armed and don't kill you, don't make full use out of it, which is for you to be killed, then yeah, you run the risk of it getting snatched. That's how it is. Like, that's how it was back in 2005. So yeah, that's how it is now. And even then, like, if you played Goat, you know that you don't want to run the risk of your BLS getting snatched, because it's really bad if that happens. And that was 10 years ago, pretty much. It was pretty much 10 years ago when that was the case. It's still the case now, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think that that's a reason for people to say that Snatch Steal is broken. I think that that's a skillful element that Snatch Steal adds to the game, in that you can't just drop all your best cards immediately. There has to be an element of, well, I'll conserve this until I have enough to protect my card, because there's the risk of it getting Snatch Stolen. And that applies to more than BLS and Dark Armed. It applies to any Floodgate monster, so the Fiends, or later on like a Jind Necros Ritual, or Darklaw, or something like that. You know, you have to think. You have to think, is this worth the risk of it getting Snatch Stolen? And unfortunately, oftentimes you will, because Snatch Steal is at 1, and the way limited cards work is often you evaluate the risk as being lower, so you fall into those plays more often, so it will feel like you get punished for it more often. But really, Snatch Steal being able to steal powerful cards, like, even on a logical basis, it isn't a problem of Snatch Steals. It's like the fact that there are powerful monsters in the game probably means that powerful monsters should be removed from the game, rather than it's Snatch Steal's problem because Snatch Steal can snatch powerful monsters. It's like, if you were only able to steal bad monsters instead of really powerful ones, then it wouldn't be Snatch Steal's problem. That's not to say that Snatch Steal isn't a problem, but therefore the primary problem is not Snatch Steal, despite the fact that Snatch Steal may be a problem. It is the abundance of powerful monsters that exist in the game. So yeah, again, that argument, will there be times where you'll steal a BLS and, you know, just have the best time of your life? Yeah, there will be. And will there be times where your BLS will get stolen? Probably. But is that going to happen again a large part of the time? No, I don't think so. I think a large amount of the time, Snatch Steal will sit in your hand for a while. It'll sit in your hand until there is a safe time in which you can use it, and then you'll use it. That's how I think Snatch Steal will be used realistically. Except for this one, rather than the, yeah, you can have your stuff stolen and the OTK you, in which case it is, yeah, that is an unavoidable circumstance where Snatch Steal truly is broken. I wouldn't say Snatch Steal stealing a BLS or something like that is broken. I wouldn't say that is a reason for Snatch Steal to not be in the game, because it isn't the player with Snatch Steal's fault for conserving the Snatch Steal to the point where they can steal something of very good value, and the opponent elected to use a card of high value without obtaining maximum value for it. That's a skillful use of the card Snatch Steal. So that is the fault of the original controller of the monster. So with the first example, where you just go OTK, there's nothing that the OTK'd player could have done about that, and that is unfortunate, and that is a reason why Snatch Steal maybe is broken. But even though stealing a powerful monster is a very powerful broken effect, that does not make the card broken. It is not a broken interaction. It is a skillful interaction. It is a good interaction from the standpoint of a competitive player, which is that you want there to be more means of having greater skill rewarded in the game. You want means of punishing overextension. You want those types of interactions existing in the game. So yeah, I would say that's an argument for Snatch still being good, yeah, but not for it being broken. And the other one is Hidden Armory. People are saying, well, Hidden Armory allows you to generate a Snatch Steal engine, and that you can, you know, like rinse, repeat, Snatch Steals and stuff like that. What I would say on that is, like, there are two reasons why I think that it isn't a bad statement to say, like, well, Hidden Armory exists. It's like, cool, like, it is a unique and interesting interaction. However, to go from there and then assume that people will play Hidden Armory and that Hidden Armory will therefore be relevant and therefore worth discussing is a much further gap. Like, people are going, oh, look, cool, Hidden Armory works with Snatch Steal. I'm like, oh, alright, cool. And they're like, people will play Hidden Armory and it will be a problem. It's like, no, that's a separate assumption. That is, which has its own faults. So that's more what I'm addressing. For the immediate moment, there are two reasons why I think it is naive to assume that Hidden Armory will get played. The first is that just on a pure space basis, like, you won't have enough space to run 3 Hidden Armory probably. You look at the decks that exist now. As I said before, engine cards take up a large part of the deck now. It isn't like you have a 20 card engine anymore. It's like the engine will be 30 to 35 cards most likely, and then you run a few luxury techs on top of that. So with everything, when you're building a deck, you don't think of it in terms of, is this card good? You think of it as, this card the best use for this space compared to what I could run if I weren't running that card. So take Snatch Steal. Snatch Steal is a limited card and it falls under the category. I mean, I haven't done a cup theory video. I might eventually do a cup theory video, but I speak in terms of cup theory, and I made a post on it on Duelist Ground, so if you want to stalk the fucking hat thread until you find my post, go ahead. But I build decks on the premise that each card has a specific use. It's either for consistency, utility, or power. So, and then you can sub-categorize them from there. So, Snatch Steal is what I referred to earlier as an aggressive power spell. It is a power card. It doesn't make your deck more consistent, and it doesn't really add utility to your deck. Something like Book of Moon or Forbidden Lance would be a utility card. Cards that are inherently anything but linear in their use. And Snatch Steal isn't necessarily linear. Like, you can use cards in a non-linear way, as I said with the example of using it as if it were an MST to bait out an MST. That's obtaining utility out of cards that aren't specifically designed for utility. But Snatch Steal isn't there for utility. Your purpose in running Snatch Steal isn't for utility, it is for power. Which is again why I refer to MST as a consistency card, because it is... Sorry, why I refer to it as a power card. It is the staple power card in that it is just destroy one spell trap. It doesn't make you more consistent, it doesn't add utility, it is just a power card. Likewise, Upstart Goblin is the perfect consistency card, because it is just activate draw card, and it improves consistency flawlessly. Even something like Duality, there are times where it will be inconsistent. Upstart is perfect consistency. So aside from that little side tangent, it's just to make this part of the discussion a bit easier to understand in case I was using jargon that was a bit confusing. So I would refer to Snatch Steal as an aggressive power spell. You compare that with whatever you would run in its place, and let's say for argument's sake it would be another aggressive power spell. So let's say Raigeki. You would think, well, what are the benefits to Snatch Steal? This. What are the benefits to Raigeki? This. And then you're like, well, I'm going to decide to run Snatch Steal. So you decide to run Snatch Steal. That is a decision that you have made for one space in your deck based on, like, is this card, this individual card, a better use of the space than this card? And subsequently this card. Like, when I did my hieratic deck profile for Nationals Top, like, I discussed how there were literally like 14 other cards that I had considered for 2 spaces. And that's really how it is. It's like 38 cards will build themselves, and then for the last 2 you have like a plethora of options where you have to just think, alright, is this best? Is this best? Is this best? This. So yeah, Snatch Steal will often be ran because it will often be the case where Snatch Steal is more powerful than everything else that you could run, and therefore would be more useful. It's it's a very safe statement, or a safe assumption, to say that Snatch Steal will get played. I think without a doubt Snatch Steal will see play, but to say that Hidden Armory will get played because it's Hewitt Snatch Steal is not a safe assumption, because then that assumes that Hidden Armory is a better allocation of space than this, which probably isn't true. What is Hidden Armory? Hidden Armory doesn't equal Snatch Steal. That's a false assumption that people make. They assume, well, Hidden Armory equals Snatch Steal. No, Hidden Armory does not equal Snatch Steal. Hidden Armory is a consistency card. It isn't a power card. It's a consistent way of obtaining that power card, but the card on a base level is not a power card at all. But what is the function of that consistency card? It doesn't aid the deck's win condition in any way, which is the design of what consistency cards are meant to do. They're meant to improve the deck's consistency, not to improve a certain card's consistency. So the question is Snatch Steal so important to the core strategy of the deck that you would forfeit 3 cards in order to see Snatch Steal more consistently? And in most cases, I think the answer is no. In most cases, I think that Hidden Armory will not be better than the next best choice, whatever the next best choice may be. I don't know. That's the decision of the person building the deck. But I'm pretty sure in most cases, considering how tight decks are nowadays, you don't have the luxury of being able to throw a few of a tech card into the build. I think that it's improbable that people will be running multiple copies of Hidden Armory, or just splashing Hidden Armory even on the basis that, well, it will be able to tutor Snatch Steal, and Snatch Steal's powerful, because there are better things that you can run. There are better cards than that single Hidden Armory in most likelihood. So what I would say about Hidden Armory is that I mean, people talking about the Shadow equip spell, it could potentially see play, but I don't think it would see play even in the Shadow build outside of like 1 Snatch Steal, 1 of the Shadow equip spell, 1 Hidden Armory. Like that's at most how I think it would be if it were to manifest itself. I definitely don't think that decks will just be playing 3 Hidden Armory and 1 Snatch Steal in order to get a better victory. But even get better victory to get Snatch Steal. But even aside from the fact that, like, that is my own assumption, which I've rooted in theory, and I've explained more than those saying, well, it works with Hidden Armory, therefore it will be played. I've explained why I think it won't be played. I'm not saying that it 100% won't be played, because it could be played. Who's to know? Like, I can't make that statement. But I feel that is the case. But more importantly, I feel or know even that to assume that Hidden Armory will be played because it interacts with Snatch Steal in such a manner is not true. You have to think more about it. You have to think, like, even though this could work, is it the best allocation of the space? The spare space that my deck has access to. And I don't think that is true. It isn't so much, is Hidden Armory bad? No, Hidden Armory isn't necessarily bad. But I think that just because it interacts with Snatch Steal does not mean that it will interact with Snatch Steal, so to speak. Just because it could occur does not mean that it will occur. And I won't really consider it unless it does occur. If 3 Hidden Armory Snatch Steal does become a thing, then yeah, maybe I will have to address how I play more. But until I see that is a concrete thing, I won't lose any sleep over it, and I don't think it will be a concrete thing personally. Another thing with Hidden Armory is that it forfeits you your normal summon, which is something that is very important. it's very important in every deck that exists at the moment. In Burning Abyss, Tour Guide, or even just normal summoning a Burning Abyss and then special summoning one from your hand and overlaying to make Dante and detaching the one that you normal summon to get that effect. Yeah, or even just Mathematician as well. Your normal summon definitely is important. And if you play Clifford, obviously the normal summon is important. If you play Shadow, Mathematician is very, very good. Mathematician is like Stratos for Shadow. It's very, very good. And Denko Sekka is also very, very good. It just completely locks them out of the game. Your normal summon is a resource. It is a genuine resource because you're only entitled to one per turn. So Hidden Armory forfeiting you your normal summon or set is actually really huge. And will often mean, even in those scenarios where like, oh, Snatch still OTK. If you go Hidden Armory Snatch still try to OTK, you're also having to forfeit your normal summon. You're going to have to OTK without the ability to normal summon, even though the Snatch still essentially replaces the normal summon. But it isn't in addition to, so, you know, again, like, it isn't concrete, it isn't, yeah, Hidden Armory is definitely going to get ran, or even it definitely isn't going to get ran. I don't know for certain, but I think that, like, just think about this stuff more, develop it more. If you truly think that Hidden Armory will get played, like, why? Where, like, root it in theory, say, nah, it works in this deck specifically, it works with this interaction, it is the best allocation of space because this interaction is superior to this. And so far I haven't seen any of that. I've just seen, well, it works with Hidden Armory, and it's like, yeah, cool, like, a lot of things work in tandem with each other. That doesn't necessarily mean that they'll get played. So those are the main arguments that I see for why Snatch Steal is broken and shouldn't be in the game. Those arguments being that you can steal something in OTK, you can steal a very powerful monster, and it works with Hidden Armory. Those are the only arguments that I'm seeing, really. And it's odd because people could just base the argument on the effect. You could say, well, clearly stealing an opponent's monster is too powerful. That's why all the cards have been banned. We've observed this. We've observed even something like Mind Control in WCQ format, like back in Synchro Cat days, like Brain Control back when that was still around. We've observed that those cards are too powerful, but no one's even talking about, like, oh, well, Snatch Steal is broken because of the design of the card. They're listing all these scenarios and all these things that just don't make sense. Like, they will happen, they do make sense in terms of they will occur, but they don't make sense in terms of arguments as to why the card shouldn't exist. It's like, apply it to the whole. Don't grasp at individual scenarios or individual interactions, because that's what Hidden Armory is. It's an individual interaction. Don't cite all these things and say, well, clearly it is too powerful. It's like, no, look at the entire issue as a whole and assess whether the card as a whole is too powerful to be in the game or not. So I will conclude with my own personal opinion as I see it now. As I would, if I were to speculate on how Snatch Steal will affect the game, I mean, I can't say for certain. I can't say, like, yeah, it's definitely gonna be good, or it's definitely gonna be broken or anything like that. I think that it's exciting in that there hasn't been a take an opponent's monster type of card brought back into the game for a long time. I mean, like, Mind Control just isn't good. So other than that, there hasn't been a card of Snatch Steal's power for a while. And I think that between Snatch Steal, Brain Control, and Change of Heart, I think that Snatch Steal is the fairest one. Just out of experience, having played with Brain Control, it's, again, it will seem weird to say, like, oh, well, you can MST Snatch Steal and stuff like that, but Snatch Steal inherently has things about it which doesn't make it as difficult to counter as Brain Control is. So I think if they were to bring about one of the take control of an opponent's monsters type of cards back, then I'm glad it was Snatch Steal out of everything else that it could have been. I'd certainly have rather had Snatch Steal back over Brain Control or Change of Heart. And it is a very powerful effect, obviously, but there are very powerful effects that exist in the game that don't really get played. Like, when I first saw Raigeki came back, I was a bit like, wow, this is This is interesting, mainly because Dark Hole was still at 1, and in my mind it was like, well, Dark Hole should certainly come to 3 before Raigeki comes back. But, you know, you play for 3 months, and I'm very glad Raigeki is a part of the game. Right? Raigeki is a completely healthy part of the game. So Snatch still could become like that, or it could be OP. What I would predict, I guess, is that looking into the future, I feel like the new format, once Necros and Heroes and all of that are released, I think it will be Necros as the best deck with Clifforts and Heroes and maybe Burning Abyss in the meta. I think that those will be the main decks. So you would have to analyze it matchup by matchup, I think, for a start, as the perspective of someone who would be playing Necros. Is Snatch still particularly good in the Necros mirror? No, not not at all, to be honest, because as part of playing around Trishula, you try to avoid committing to the field. So because of that, there will rarely be uses to actually Snatch steal anything. I mean, there are some cool interactions, like if you Snatch steal a Jinned ritual monster, not only will you get to special summon, but they will also not be able to special summon, because that's how it is ruled in the TCG. If the control of the monster changes, then the effect switches. So, I mean, that's kind of cool, but Jinn strategies are already kind of brittle anyway, and I've already talked about this, so having another thing that deals with that, it isn't broken. Like, it's cool, maybe unnecessary, but it isn't broken. So yeah, Necros against Necros. Snatch still isn't really good at all. Like, I'd probably side it out. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's broken there. The Necros against Cliffort. Against Necros, like, as the perspective of the Necros player against Clifford, honestly, Snatch still is very good. It is very, very good, because the only times where you lose really are if they floodgate you up, mainly skill drain, because Emptiness, even though Emptiness sucks, like, you can play around Emptiness. You can't really play around skill drain as easily. But if you have Snatch Still, it directly really solves that problem, because like, they tend to summon Disc or Shell if they have Emptiness. Sorry, if they have Skill Drain. That's their like telltale giveaway that they have Skill Drain. So then, I don't know, you'll summon something and use its effect to bail out the Skill Drain, and they use the Skill Drain. Normally in that situation, you've kind of lost, because you're staring down a 2-8 or 3-1 even beat stick, and like, unless you summon Decisive Armor, and even then you might not be able to swing over it. Like, it's a very precarious situation to be in. But with Snatch Steal, you just steal their monster, and then suddenly, like, even if you drop a Unicorn, it's enough. It isn't enough a game, but you assume that they'd have used Scout's effect once. It's enough so that they can't use Scout's effect again. And even just stealing a Cliffort Beatstick under Skill Drain, swinging with it, their Scout effect in the early game won't be enough to remove that threat. So you just have this Beatstick, and the better their first turn setup in terms of, you know, whether it's like Disc with a sack on it, or just Disc, or Carrier or Helix with a sack on it, or just Carrier or Helix. The better their setup, the more punished they are when you Snatch Steal it. So yeah, it's very, very good in the Clifford matchup. I won't lie, I won't pretend like it's fair. It isn't. And yeah, it probably is broken in that matchup. And then the hero matchup, it's just a high risk, high reward thing. Like, if they make Dark Law, there are many outs to Dark Law. Stealing their Dark Law is very powerful should it happen, because you know, suddenly their floodgate becomes your floodgate, and suddenly they can't do anything because their deck is grave reliant. So it's very powerful should it resolve. However, out of all the other outs to Dark Claw, Snatch Steal is the most risky. If you look at something like Dark Hole or Raigeki, that just deals with the field, it means that the Dark Claw is going to die because they can't chain Mask Exchange to it. Anything that targets isn't safe because you run the risk of them chaining another Mask Change to their Dark Claw to bring out another Dark Claw, and then your targeting effect kind of gets ruined. So inherently things like Dark Hole and Raigeki will serve as better outs to a Dark Claw field than things like Book of Moon, Tsukuyomi, and Snatch Steal. But then additionally on top of that, Snatch Steal also has the added vulnerability to MST. So all those things mean that Snatch Steal against heroes, if it resolves, yeah, it's very powerful, but it's also the one that is the least likely to resolve. So it's just a risk reward kind of thing. I wouldn't say it's broken because there are lots of outs. There are lots of outs to it. But I would say it is good, certainly, maybe even very good. And then against BA, I don't really think stealing a Dante will make too much of a difference. I mean, Necros has, from what I've observed, Necros has a very good matchup against BA. So it isn't like it adds anything too significant to that particular matchup, but I don't know the matchup well enough to comment on it. So yeah, I guess Necros versus Necros, Snatch Steal is not good. It's average at best. Necros against Cliff Fort, it is broken, truly. It is very, very strong. And Necros against heroes, it's kinda in between. It's kinda in between average and broken. It can be anywhere. It can be anywhere on that scale. So yeah, that's how I think Snatch Steal will be relevant in the upcoming format. Whether or not it proves to be too powerful remains to be seen. But this is more just like, think of your arguments before you say them, internet. Don't just be like, oh, Snatch Steal is bad, and say a stupid argument, or Snatch Steal is broken, and say an unfounded argument. Like, think about it, think about the reasons why you are thinking the things that you're thinking, and actually develop the arguments, because otherwise I'll make a video, and I will rebut them, as I've done now. But yeah, more stuff will be up in the future. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you around.